Karen had lived in the Willow Creek apartments for nearly 10 years. She knew the building inside out, every crack in the sidewalk, every squeaky door, every neighbor's routine. To her, it wasn't just a place to live. It was a kingdom, and she considered herself its queen. She walked the halls like she owned them, her high heels clicking loudly against the tiles, announcing her presence even before anyone saw her. Other tenants gave her a polite nod, some even a forced smile, because everyone knew Karen was the type who liked to be in control. She liked to think she knew everything that happened in the building. Every time a new tenant moved in, she would watch them like a hawk, noting what time they came and went, and silently judging if they were fit to live in her domain. That morning, Karen had just finished her usual routine of checking the mailboxes and gossiping with Mrs. Patel about a neighbor's noisy dog. She had been enjoying a cup of coffee in the small courtyard when she noticed a moving van pull up near the entrance. A man stepped out, tall and confident, wearing a neat suit and carrying a set of keys. Karen's eyes narrowed. She didn't recognize him. Who was he? And why did he have so many keys? Immediately, she began to formulate a story in her head. This man had to be up to something suspicious, maybe trying to steal something from the building. Worse, break into her apartment. Karen had always assumed she knew the types of people who could live in Willow Creek. A tall man with polished shoes and a calm demeanor did not fit the profile. Her mind raced with possibilities, all of them negative. What is he doing here? She muttered, under her breath, straining to see what he was carrying. He had a set of tools and a stack of locks, and he was heading straight for the front doors. Karen's heart began to race, not from fear, but from indignation. How dare a stranger come into her building without her knowing about it? She could already hear herself yelling at him, telling him he needed permission to do anything in her home. Without thinking, Karen marched toward the entrance, her handbag swinging aggressively by her side. Neighbors glanced at her, sensing that a storm was coming. Karen had a reputation for being quick to anger, especially when it came to her domain. As she reached the front doors, she saw the man kneeling down, pulling out a brand new lock from his toolkit. He looked calm and professional, carefully studying the door and measuring the alignment. Karen's eyes widened in disbelief. He was actually changing the lock? Karen stopped a few feet away, trying to control the urge to yell. She had always considered herself reasonable, but in situations like this, her temper flared faster than she could stop it. "Excuse me?" she called, her voice sharp. The man looked up, his expression calm but alert. He held up a hand politely, as if to say, "One moment, please." Karen took a deep breath, preparing herself for a confrontation. "Who do you think you are changing the locks of this building without asking anyone?" she demanded, her voice rising. She didn't wait for an answer because she already knew he was wrong. She could see herself calling the police if he didn't stop. Immediately, the neighbors watched in silence, some curious, some amused, some worried. The man stood and smiled politely. "Good morning, ma'am. My name is Marcus. I recently purchased this building, and I'm updating the locks for security purposes.
Relay.
Everything I'm doing is legal and within my rights as the owner." Karen's jaw dropped. "What?" She blinked rapidly, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Purchase the building? Owner? How could that be? She had lived here for 10 years and had never heard a word about the building being sold. Her mind struggled to process this information. This didn't fit into the story she had already created in her head, but Karen was nothing if not determined. She didn't like admitting she could be wrong. She certainly didn't like the idea of a stranger, especially a man she didn't know, having control over her kingdom. She crossed her arms and planted herself firmly in front of the door, refusing to let him continue without her approval. "I don't care who you are," she said, her voice trembling slightly with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You cannot just come here and start changing things. This is my home." Marcus remained calm, his hands open in a gesture of peace. "I understand your concerns, ma'am. I know change can be unsettling, but I bought this building legally. These locks are for everyone's safety, including yours. I would be happy to show you the documents, if you like." Karen's mind was racing, but her pride and suspicion blocked any rational thought. She was used to getting her way, and this situation was not going to bend to her whims. She waved him off, Documents, schmuckments. I don't need to see any papers. You don't belong here. Some neighbors had begun to gather, whispering among themselves. Karen didn't notice. She was too wrapped up in her own indignation, imagining headlines she would tell later. Stranger tries to take over our building. Her imagination ran wild. Maybe he was a con artist, she thought. Maybe he had planned this for weeks. Maybe he was here to steal the tenant's mail, or even kidnap someone. Marcus, however, didn't rise to the bait. He continued to work slowly and carefully, replacing the locks while explaining politely that each step was part of the legal process. Karen's frustration grew. She stomped her foot, which made the neighbors flinch. Tried to intervene gently. Maybe we should just wait and see, he said, but Karen waved him away. He's too angry to listen. As Marcus finished the last lock, Karen's outrage only intensified. She had never been ignored or dismissed in her life, and this man, with his calm voice and polite manners, seemed to mock her by simply doing his job. She felt humiliated, exposed in front of the neighbors she so carefully monitored. Her mind started racing again with strategies to regain control. She could call the police, complain to the building association. WRITE letters. Anything to make him stop. Meanwhile, stepped back, wiped his hands, and smiled politely at Karen. All done, ma'am. The building is secure now. I appreciate your patience. Karen's lips trembled, not from fear but from rage and embarrassment. She could feel the neighbors' eyes on her, some suppressing smiles, some staring in disbelief at how quickly she had jumped to conclusions. She realized that she was now the center of attention, but instead of calming down, she grew more frantic. She had been caught off guard. Her ego refused to accept it. As she stormed off to her apartment to plan her next move, she muttered, under her breath, promising herself that she would not let this man take control of her world. She didn't yet know who Marcus was, or how firmly he was going to stand in his own power. But she was already imagining the battle that lay ahead. Karen had faced challenges before, but this one felt different. This one felt personal. Little did she know Marcus's calm and fair approach would soon put her over the edge in ways she could never have anticipated. Assumptions, her pride, and her sense of entitlement were about to collide with the reality that she was no longer in charge, and that would only make the next few days even more dramatic. Karen paced back and forth inside her apartment, her mind racing faster than her footsteps. She could still see Marcus standing calmly outside, finishing the lock changes, completely unbothered by her anger. To her, it was more than was an attack on her authority. For years, she had maintained the illusion that she controlled everything in Willow Creek Apartments. Now, a stranger had walked in, politely ignored her demands, and done exactly what he wanted. Karen could not let that slide. Her first thought was to confront him again, face to face. She grabbed her phone and dialed a neighbor she trusted for backup. Someone who would witness the situation and confirm that she was being reasonable and that Marcus was suspicious. She wanted witnesses because she knew that standing alone, no one would believe her version of events. Mrs. Patel, who had lived across the hall from her for years, answered with a soft, hesitant voice. Mrs. Patel. Thank goodness, Karen hissed. You need to come out here. There's a man, he's changing the locks. He doesn't belong here, and I think he's trying to take over the building. Mrs. Patel, always kind and cautious, replied, Karen, I think he said he owns the building now. Maybe it's legal. Karen's voice rose an octave. Legal? Nonsense. I've lived here 10 years. I know who belongs and who doesn't. This man is suspicious. You have to see for yourself. Within minutes, Mrs. Patel shuffled outside, her expression a mix of curiosity and fear. She saw Marcus calmly organizing his tools, smiling politely. At Karen waved her arms dramatically. Look, see what he's doing? He's changing the locks. He doesn't have the right. Call the police if you have to. Mrs. Patel glanced at Marcus, then at the locks. Karen, he does have a calm way about him. Maybe he's, I don't know, the owner. Karen's eyes widened in disbelief. Owner? It's ridiculous. Who sells a building without telling tenants? I've been living here for years. He's clearly lying. Karen's mind refused to accept the truth. Instead, she created a mental story where Marcus was a con artist, pretending to be the owner, maybe planning to scam the tenants, maybe steal mail or money. The neighbors around started to gather quietly, watching the scene unfold. Some whispered to each other, surprised by Karen's obvious anger. A few younger tenants even hid behind corners, trying not to laugh at her dramatic gestures. Karen, however, saw them as potential allies or potential spies. Fueled by indignation, Karen marched straight up to Marcus again, this time standing almost nose-tunes with him. "Stop what you're doing immediately," she demanded. Voice shook slightly, betraying the combination of fear and anger. "This is my home. You cannot just come here and change the locks. I don't care what papers you have." Marcus looked down at her with the same calm, patient expression he had before. "Ma'am, I understand your concerns, and I assure you, I'm not here to harm anyone. I purchased this building legally. Changing the locks is necessary for safety. I have the documents to prove ownership. You're welcome to see them anytime." Karen's face flushed red. She could feel her blood boiling. How dare he stay so calm? How dare he speak politely when she was shouting? It was as if he was mocking her, deliberately testing her patience. "Documents? Don't make me laugh," she snapped. "Care about documents? You're an intruder. You're trespassing." Marcus sighed softly, almost as if he had encountered this reaction many times before. He gestured toward the building entrance. "I'm not trespassing. I own this building. I understand that this is confusing and frustrating. I'm here to make things safer for everyone, including you." Karen, however, was not listening. Her mind was filled with images of a complete takeover. Maybe he would change the locks and then kick tenants out, she thought. Maybe he would install cameras everywhere to spy on them. Maybe he had a whole gang helping him. Her imagination ran wild, building an entire scenario where she and her neighbors were victims of a criminal plot. She turned to the growing crowd of neighbors. "Do you see this? This man is dangerous. He is changing the locks without permission. Someone should call the police immediately." A few neighbors exchanged glances. Some were curious. Others tried not to laugh. None wanted to confront her directly, but whispers started spreading. Karen, oblivious to the subtle amusement, felt powerful. She imagined herself a heroine, protecting her home from a mysterious stranger. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his work methodically. He removed the last old lock and installed the new one without raising his voice or showing any sign of frustration. Every action he took was careful and deliberate, highlighting his professionalism. Karen, however, only saw it as defiance. He was deliberately ignoring her, she thought. He was challenging her authority and she would not stand for it. Karen's temper flared further. She stomped her foot on the ground, causing a few pigeons to fly off the courtyard roof. "This is outrageous. I'm not going to let you take over my home. I know my rights," she shouted. Marcus finally stepped back, brushing off his hands. "Ma'am, I am finished. The locks are changed. I assure you, everything is legal and above board. You are welcome to examine my ownership papers if you wish." Karen's lips trembled. She wanted to yell more, to threaten him with the authorities, but something in her mind hesitated. She had not expected him to be so calm, so polite, so confident. Normally, people crumbled under her anger, but Marcus did not, and that unsettled her more than anything. She turned to Mrs. Patel, trying to find an ally. "See, even she doesn't seem to be taking me seriously," she exclaimed. Mrs. Patel, however, only nodded nervously, unsure of what to say. "Karen, maybe he really does own the building." "No, it's impossible," Karen shouted. Her voice cracked slightly with emotion. "He's lying. He has to be lying." The crowd of neighbors had grown slightly. Some younger tenants whispered to each other, noting how dramatic Karen was being. A few had their phones out, quietly recording the scene. Karen didn't notice. She was entirely consumed with her battle against Marcus, convinced that she was standing up for herself and for the other tenants, protecting them from a mysterious threat. Marcus, seeing that the confrontation was escalating beyond a simple explanation, suggested calmly, "Ma'am, if you would like, I can take you to my office and show you the documents proving my ownership. Everything I am doing is legal. There's no need for fear or anger." Karen shook her head violently. "I don't trust you. I don't trust anyone who walks in here and starts changing my locks. No one does that without a reason." Her emotions were a whirlwind. Pride, anger, fear, and suspicion collided inside her. She wanted to call the police, to assert control, to prove she was right. But she also felt a small nagging doubt: what if he really did own the building? Her ego refused to accept it. That tiny doubt only made her more furious. As she stood there, fuming, Marcus turned slightly and addressed the crowd. "Neighbors, I understand this situation looks sudden. Now, I assure you my intention is to make Willow Creek Apartments safer and more secure. I will meet with anyone who has concerns." Karen heard him, but her focus remained on herself. She felt humiliated, exposed, and powerless. For the first time in years, someone had walked into her domain and refused to bow to her authority. Her mind raced with ways to regain control. Call the police, file complaints, write letters, warn neighbors, maybe even organize a protest. She would not be ignored. The tension was thick. Every passerby in the building's courtyard could feel it. Karen's energy was explosive, while Marcus's calm demeanor was steady and unshakable. It was a clash of personalities, of wills. Karen wanted chaos and confrontation. Marcus offered reason and patience. And in that moment, the stage was set for a showdown that would only escalate in the coming days. Karen finally retreated slightly, deciding to go back inside her apartment. But her mind did not stop. She continued pacing, muttering plans, imagining schemes to undermine Marcus, determined to take back her sense of control. She did not yet realize that Marcus's calm professionalism and legal ownership would not only foil her immediate plans, but also gradually expose her overreaction to the neighbors. From that day forward, Willow Creek Apartments would never be the same. Karen's world, once orderly and predictable, had been disrupted. Marcus, patient, professional, and steady, had unknowingly ignited a personal battle that Karen was determined to win, no matter how irrational it seemed. The morning after the lock incident, Karen woke up with a restless energy. She could barely sleep, her mind replaying every detail of Marcus's calm smile, every measured word he had spoken, every quiet movement he had made while installing the new locks. She felt humiliated, almost as if her authority over the apartment had been stolen from her. She knew she had to act quickly. If she didn't, she feared she would lose her influence over the neighbors entirely. She grabbed her phone and started drafting a series of messages to other tenants, painting Marcus as a suspicious figure. "Did anyone else notice the strange man outside yesterday? Is changing the locks? No notice. Completely unprofessional," she typed, making sure to emphasize the danger and the lack of respect for tenants. She added a few emojis of warning signs, hoping to make the message appear urgent and dramatic. By mid-morning, a small group of neighbors had gathered near her door, buzzing with curiosity. Some had received her messages and wanted to know what was happening. Others had heard the commotion. From the day before, Karen, feeling a surge of pride, welcomed them as though she were leading a small rebellion. "He's dangerous," she declared. "He's changing our locks without warning. We have to protect ourselves." The neighbors exchanged glances. Unsure how to respond, a few murmured nervously, wondering if Karen might be overreacting. Still, the energy of the group emboldened her. She decided that they needed to take more decisive action. She suggested they call the police immediately, claiming that Marcus might be trespassing or attempting a takeover. Marcus, meanwhile, was unaware of the growing storm. He spent the morning walking through the building, checking security systems, and making notes on minor repairs. His demeanor was calm, professional, and polite. He greeted tenants with a friendly nod, sometimes pausing to explain small changes he planned for the building. Most tenants appreciated his approach. They saw that he was organized, responsible, and genuinely interested in maintaining the property. Karen, however, interpreted his actions differently. To her, every polite gesture, every casual smile, was a subtle mockery. He was deliberately flaunting his authority, she believed, making her feel powerless. Her imagination ran wild with possibilities. What if he was planning to raise rents unfairly? What if he had installed hidden cameras in apartments? What if he was planning a complete tenant eviction? Determined to escalate the situation, Karen dialed the local police non-emergency line. "Hello, I need to report a suspicious man," she said in a dramatic tone. "He is changing the locks in our building without permission. I don't know who he is, but I fear he's up to something. Please send someone quickly." The dispatcher, professional and calm, asked her for details. The address, a description of the man, and what exactly had happened. Karen rattled off everything, emphasizing Marcus's calmness as a sign of deceit. "He's too calm," she insisted. "That's how dangerous people are. You have to hurry." Within 20 minutes, a pair of police officers arrived. They approached the building cautiously, noting the small group of tenants gathered outside. Karen, seeing them, waved, her arms dramatically. "Thank goodness you're here," she exclaimed. "This man has no right to be changing our locks. He might be dangerous." The officers nodded politely and asked Karen to step aside so they could speak with Marcus. Marcus greeted them calmly, handing over his identification and ownership. "Documents. Good morning, officers," he said. "I recently purchased this building and changed the locks for safety reasons. Everything here is legal and above board. You're welcome to verify." Karen watched in disbelief as the officers examined the documents. They asked Marcus a few questions about the purchase and confirmed that he was indeed the legal owner. Karen's face twisted with frustration. She could not believe what she was seeing. It was as if her entire reality had been turned upside down. She had expected a confrontation, a scandal, maybe even a police warning for Marcus. Instead, he was completely in the right. Karen felt a mix of anger and embarrassment. She had mobilized neighbors, called the police, and built an entire narrative in her head about Marcus being a criminal. Now it was crumbling before her eyes. She could feel her authority slipping, and that terrified her more than anything. After the officers left, confirming everything was legal, Karen retreated into her apartment, fuming silently. She refused to admit defeat out loud, but in her mind, she started plotting her next moves. She decided that if she could not stop Marcus through authority or the law, she would have to find other ways. She would gather evidence, observe him, and perhaps expose him for misleading the tenants in some way. Marcus, meanwhile, continued his work undisturbed. He was aware of Karen's agitation, but did not see it as a personal attack. To him, it was simply part of the challenge of taking over a new building with long-term tenants. He focused on improving safety and ensuring everything was organized. He installed proper lighting, checked fire alarms, and ensured the security cameras were functioning correctly. Every step he took improved the building's conditions. Even if Karen refused to acknowledge it, Karen, however, was not interested in improvements. She was obsessed with the idea of control. She watched Marcus from her window, noting every detail: how he moved through the halls, how he interacted with tenants, and how he smiled politely at people who greeted him. In her mind, every polite gesture was an act of manipulation. Every calm answer was proof that he was plotting something sinister, determined to involve more neighbors. Karen began a small campaign of whispers and warnings. She went door to door, speaking urgently to tenants, planting seeds of doubt. "He seems nice," she would say, "but be careful. People like him don't show their true intentions immediately. Trust me, I know from experience." Some neighbors listened politely, but remained skeptical. Others nodded along, curious to see what might happen. A few began quietly recording the interactions, both Karen's warnings and Marcus's responses. Karen, however, believed she was building an army of allies. She imagined herself as the protector of the building, the one who could prevent disaster. One afternoon, the tension reached a peak. Karen confronted Marcus again, this time in the hallway. "You can't just ignore us," she exclaimed. "We are tenants here, and we have a right to know what's happening." Marcus stopped and looked at her calmly. "Karen, I have tried to explain everything. I am happy to meet with you and any tenants who have questions. Everything is legal. Goal is to ensure safety and maintain the building. There is no need for fear." Karen, however, interpreted his calmness as defiance. She insisted he stop all work until he agreed to a tenants' meeting. Marcus, still calm, explained that some maintenance could not wait and promised a formal meeting later in the week. Karen reluctantly backed down, but continued to seethe inside. That evening, Karen hosted an informal gathering in her apartment. She invited a few neighbors, sharing her dramatic account of Marcus's actions. She described the lock change as a sinister move, emphasizing his calm demeanor as proof of ill intent. The neighbors listened, some nodding, some skeptical. Karen felt powerful as she spoke, believing she was shaping their perceptions. Meanwhile, Marcus prepared for the tenants' meeting. He wanted to address concerns directly, explain his actions, and demonstrate that his intentions were professional and legal. He reviewed the purchase documents, drafted an agenda, and planned to answer every question politely. He was confident that once tenants understood the situation, Karen's exaggerations would not hold weight. As the day of the meeting approached, Karen's anxiety grew. She felt a mix of anticipation and fear.
Oh.
Would Marcus be able to charm the tenants and undermine her warnings? Would they see him as a responsible landlord, or as the manipulative figure she believed him to be? She spent hours rehearsing what she would say, imagining different scenarios, preparing for every possible reaction. The tension in Willow Creek Apartments had reached a boiling point. Tenants were aware of the conflict, neighbors were curious, and Karen's energy had created a palpable sense of drama. Everyone wondered what would happen next. Would Karen succeed in convincing them of Marcus's danger? Or would Marcus's professionalism win the day? The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation, one that would finally reveal the truth and force Karen to confront a reality she had spent days denying. The day of the tenants' meeting finally arrived, and the atmosphere in the building was tense. Karen had spent the entire morning pacing back and forth in her apartment, rehearsing every word she planned to say. She had prepared a long list of complaints, concerns, and warnings. She wanted to make sure everyone understood that Marcus was, in her eyes, untrustworthy and potentially dangerous. She felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. In her mind, this was her moment to take control, to show the tenants who was really in charge of the building, Marcus. On the other hand, approached the day with calm professionalism. He arrived early, setting up chairs in the community room and arranging documents on a table for tenants to review. He had brought copies of the property purchase papers, maintenance plans, and safety updates. His goal was simple. He wanted to answer questions, address concerns, and demonstrate that he was a responsible landlord who had the building's best interests at heart. As tenants slowly trickled into the room, the tension grew. Some were curious about the conflict between Karen and Marcus. Others had already received Karen's dramatic messages and were anxious to see what would happen. Karen greeted everyone like a general leading her troops, whispering warnings in hushed tones. "Be careful," she said. "This man may seem nice, but I know what I saw. Trust me, we have to watch him closely." Marcus, observing quietly, smiled politely at each tenant. He did not respond to Karen's whispered warnings, choosing instead to focus on presenting information clearly and calmly. He had learned early on that reacting to her drama would only escalate the situation, so he maintained his composure, which only added to his credibility in the eyes of most tenants. The meeting began with Marcus introducing himself formally. "Good evening, everyone," he said warmly. "I'm Marcus, your new landlord. I recently purchased this building, and my goal is to ensure it is safe, well-maintained, and a place you're proud to call home. I want to answer any questions you have and discuss plans for the future." Karen, sitting near the front, felt a surge of irritation. How could he be so calm, so confident, while she had been working tirelessly to alert everyone to the danger he represented? She took a deep breath, determined to make her voice heard. When the floor opened for questions, Karen immediately raised her hand. "I have a lot of concerns," she began, her voice firm and insistent. "Yesterday, this man changed the locks without notifying us. That's not just unprofessional, it's suspicious. How do we know he isn't trying to take control of our apartments? Who approved these actions? Marcus responded calmly, holding up the legal documents. Karen, as I mentioned previously, I am the legal owner of this building. Changing the locks was necessary for safety reasons, and every tenant's rights are fully protected. I did not bypass any legal procedure. I understand it may have caused concern, and I apologize for the sudden change. But it was done to ensure everyone's security. A few tenants nodded, impressed by his clarity and honesty. Karen's frown deepened as she noticed the subtle shift in the room. Some people were clearly beginning to trust Marcus despite her warnings. She felt a pang of frustration. It was supposed to be her moment to expose him, to rally the tenants to her side. Karen pressed on, bringing up other points. And what about maintenance? Who decides what gets fixed and when? Can we trust him to be fair and transparent? How do we know he isn't making decisions that benefit himself rather than us? Marcus listened carefully, nodding. All maintenance decisions are guided by safety and fairness, he explained. I maintain records of every repair, every update. I welcome transparency and will provide all information you request. My priority is your well-being and comfort in this building, not personal gain. Some tenants whispered among themselves, impressed by his professionalism. One neighbor spoke up, I've seen him walking the halls, checking on the fire alarms and lights. Everything seems much safer now. I think he's doing a good job. Karen's frustration grew. It was clear that many tenants were starting to side with Marcus. She felt her influence slipping, and the more she tried to regain control, the more it seemed to backfire. She decided to escalate her strategy. Instead of focusing on facts, she began appealing to fear. You don't know him? He may seem nice now, but calmness can be deceiving. People like this, people with money and control, can manipulate situations. Don't let him fool you. Marcus remained composed. He acknowledged her concerns, but stayed focused on providing concrete information. I understand your worries, Karen, and I appreciate you voicing them. But please know that my actions are guided by legality and fairness. I want to work with all tenants, not against anyone. The discussion continued for nearly an hour. Tenants asked questions about security, rent, maintenance schedules, and building improvements. Marcus answered each question thoroughly, providing reassurance and clarity. Karen, meanwhile, grew increasingly agitated. She tried to interrupt several times, but Marcus politely redirected the conversation, ensuring that the meeting remained orderly. By the end of the meeting, the mood had shifted noticeably. Tenants who had been hesitant or unsure now expressed appreciation for Marcus's professionalism. They thanked him for addressing concerns directly and for showing genuine care for the building and its residents. Karen's attempts to discredit him had largely failed. After the formal meeting ended, some tenants lingered to speak with Marcus individually. They asked for advice, shared minor maintenance concerns, and even complimented him on improvements he had already made. Marcus responded with patience and warmth, reinforcing the sense that he was approachable and trustworthy. Karen, watching from the sidelines, felt a wave of defeat. She had hoped to dominate the meeting, to rally support against Marcus, but instead, she had witnessed him winning over the very tenants she had tried to influence. She felt embarrassed, powerless, and increasingly desperate, determined not to lose entirely. Karen approached Marcus one last time before leaving. You may have convinced some people tonight, but this isn't over, she said, trying to sound firm. I'll be watching, and if anything suspicious happens, you'll hear from me again. Marcus smiled politely. I respect your vigilance. Karen, my door is always open for questions, concerns, or suggestions. Let's work together for the good of all tenants. Karen left the room, simmering with frustration, but also beginning to realize that Marcus's calm professionalism was something she could not easily undermine. She spent the rest of the evening pacing her apartment, replaying the meeting in her mind. She felt a mix of anger, humiliation, and reluctant respect. Meanwhile, Marcus reviewed the day's events and made notes on tenant feedback. He was encouraged by the productive dialogue and the positive responses he received. He knew that earning trust in a building with long-term tenants could take time, but he felt confident that this meeting had been a critical step in establishing a foundation of respect and cooperation. in the following days. Small changes in the building began to reflect the outcome of the meeting. Tenants who had attended the discussion spoke positively about Marcus to their neighbors. Some started reporting minor issues directly to him, trusting that they would be handled fairly and efficiently. Karen, however, continued her efforts to monitor Marcus, trying to find any perceived misstep that could validate her warnings. She began keeping a notebook. Every polite gesture he made, every conversation with tenants, she interpreted with suspicion. Even when Marcus addressed maintenance issues or checked security cameras, she insisted in her mind that he was plotting something. Her obsession grew, fueled by a sense of powerlessness and embarrassment from the failed meeting. Despite Karen's ongoing vigilance, Marcus continued his work undisturbed. He focused on improvements that benefited the tenants, maintained transparency and consistently, communicated openly. Over time, more tenants began to see the benefits of his leadership. Karen's warnings gradually lost influence as the tangible results of Marcus's actions became undeniable. By the end of the week, the building had started to feel calmer. Tenants were more engaged, discussing improvements and raising concerns. Directly with Marcus, Karen, however, remained restless. She felt that the struggle was far from over. In her mind, she needed to reclaim control, to assert her influence once again. Even if it meant escalating her efforts further, the stage was set for a new chapter in their conflict. Karen's determination to assert control collided with Marcus's commitment to fairness and professionalism. Tension simmered beneath the surface, and every interaction held the potential for new confrontations, misunderstandings, and dramatic moments. The battle for influence in Willow Creek Apartments had not ended. It only entered a more complex phase, where patience, strategy, and perception would determine the next moves. The days after the tenants' meeting passed slowly, but the tension in the building had not fully disappeared. Karen was more restless than ever. She spent her mornings pacing her apartment, watching Marcus from her window, and noting every small movement he made. Her notebook was filled with observations. It's times he went to inspect apartments, who he spoke to, and even the way he carried his keys. In her mind, every polite smile he gave a tenant was suspicious, and every question he answered professionally was a cover-up for some hidden plan. Marcus, however, continued his routine calmly. He inspected the building regularly, fixed maintenance issues promptly, and always greeted tenants warmly. He had grown used to Karen's presence, to the constant scrutiny she imposed, and he treated it with patience. He understood that she was frustrated by the change in authority, and he refused to let her hostility affect his work. His focus remained on improving the building and maintaining trust with the tenants. One morning, loud commotion erupted in the building lobby. Karen had stormed out of her apartment, waving her notebook and shouting about danger and illegal activity. Tenants peeked from their doors, curious and somewhat anxious. Marcus, hearing the noise, quickly walked down to the lobby. He found Karen standing near the entrance, her face flushed, her voice rising with anger. "Marcus, you can't just change things without consulting us," she shouted. "You're breaking rules and you don't care about the tenants." Marcus raised his hands calmly, signaling for her to take a breath. "Karen, please," he said gently. "I understand you're upset, but as the building owner, I have responsibilities to ensure safety and proper management. Everything I do is within the law and aimed at improving the living conditions for everyone." Karen huffed, folding her arms. "You don't understand. I've been here longer than you. I know what's best for these tenants. You think you can just walk in and take control, but I won't let you." Some tenants started to gather in the lobby, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of it. Marcus turned his attention to them. "Everyone, please, let's keep calm," he said. "I want to make sure every concern is addressed fairly. Karen, I want to listen to your concerns, but we need to do this without causing panic." Karen's frustration boiled over. "You think you can manipulate everyone with your calm words? I've seen people like you before. You hide your intentions behind politeness, but I know what you're really doing." Marcus took a deep breath, remaining composed. "I'm not hiding anything. I am the legal owner, and my priority is the tenant's safety and comfort. If you have specific concerns, let's address them one by one. Accusations won't help anyone. A brave tenant finally spoke up. Karen, I think Marcus is actually helping. He fixed my heating, and he even checked the fire alarms last week. We appreciate his efforts. Karen turned to glare at the tenant. You don't know the full story? You think he's helping? But he's planning something. I won't let him trick you. Marcus calmly addressed the tenant again. Thank you for your feedback. I'm committed to maintaining this building, and your safety is my priority. Karen, I want you to see that my actions are guided by law and fairness, not personal gain. Karen, seeing that her influence was weakening further, made a decision. She would take one final step to assert control. She ran back to her apartment and grabbed a pile of old notices, letters, and photographs. She returned to the lobby, determined to prove Marcus's wrongdoing. She laid the documents on a table and began pointing out various incidents from the past, claiming that Marcus was continuing some hidden agenda. The tenants watched quietly, some out of curiosity, others out of skepticism. Marcus observed silently, listening carefully to each claim. When Karen finished, Marcus addressed the group. I have reviewed all these documents, and I assure you that everything I do is legal and transparent. Karen, I understand your concern, but these old issues have been resolved or are unrelated to current management. I want to work with you. Not against you, but accusations need to be based on facts, not assumptions. Karen's face turned red with anger. She realized that Marcus's calm, factual responses were slowly dismantling her credibility. Tenants were beginning to whisper among themselves, some nodding in agreement with Marcus, some clearly frustrated by Karen's persistent negativity. Seeing the shift, Karen decided to make one last dramatic move. She began accusing Marcus of discrimination, claiming that because he was a black man, he could not be trusted, and that his actions were suspicious. The room fell silent. Some tenants were shocked by her words, while others frowned. Sensing the unfairness of her statement, Marcus's expression remained calm, but his voice carried firm authority. Karen, accusations based on race are not acceptable. I am here to manage this building fairly and legally for everyone, regardless of race or background. Your comments are harmful and untrue. I ask that we focus on facts and constructive dialogue, not prejudice. The silence in the room was palpable. Tenants looked at Karen, then at Marcus, and many were visibly disappointed in her behavior. A few spoke up in support of Marcus, emphasizing his professionalism and dedication to improving the building. Karen felt a pang of isolation. Her tactics had not only failed, but had alienated those she hoped to influence. Marcus then addressed the entire group. Everyone, I am committed to working with you. If there are concerns, I am open to discussion and solutions. I will ensure transparency, fairness, and safety. This building is for all of us, and I want it to be a place where tenants feel respected and secure. Realizing that she could no longer manipulate the situation, felt a mix of anger, humiliation, and reluctant respect. She had underestimated Marcus's patience, professionalism, and ability to handle conflict. For the first time, she saw that he was not trying to deceive anyone. He genuinely cared about the tenants and the building. In the days that followed, Karen's behavior gradually shifted. She stopped pacing obsessively and watching Marcus from her window constantly. While she still harbored frustration, she began to recognize that Marcus was a competent landlord who could not be undermined by fear or manipulation. Marcus continued his work diligently. He organized building improvements, addressed maintenance promptly, and created a system for tenants to communicate concerns effectively. He built trust, not by confrontation, but by consistent action and fairness. Tenants began to rely on him, asking for advice, reporting issues, and even thanking him for his efforts. Karen, observing this, slowly began to accept that her attempts to control the building were over. She realized that her obsession had caused more stress for herself than for anyone else. She began focusing on her own apartment and her own life, occasionally offering advice or concerns in a reasonable manner, rather than trying to dominate. The entire community, by the end of the month, the building had transformed. Marcus's leadership had created a safer, more organized, and more harmonious environment. Tenants were happier, more engaged, and willing to communicate openly. Karen had learned a hard lesson about patience, trust, and the limits of her influence. The conflict that had started with paranoia and suspicion had finally reached resolution. Marcus's calm professionalism and commitment to fairness had won over the tenants, while Karen's attempts at manipulation and fear-mongering had failed. In the end, the building was better for it. Both Marcus and Karen had learned valuable lessons, one about responsibility and trust, the other about humility and perspective. The story concluded not with dramatic explosions or public confrontations, but with the quiet, steady establishment of respect, fairness, and community. Marcus had proven that integrity and patience could overcome suspicion and fear, and the tenants of the building finally felt secure in their home. Karen, while still wary, began to accept the reality. She was no longer in control, and that was okay. The building had a landlord who cared, and that was what truly mattered.